After seeing Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, here's my updated and extended ranking of all the Spider-Verse movies. Let's get to it. Coming in at number 13 is Morbius. Morbius is a movie that, in my opinion, could have been really intriguing and exciting for Sony's Spider-Verse. Unfortunately, it was a movie that was affected so much by the pandemic, and every delay ended up hindering the movie instead of enhancing it. I personally like Jared Leto a lot as an actor, and while this iteration of Michael Morbius isn't comic accurate, I do think he is what makes this movie somewhat watchable. I was not a fan of Matt Smith's performance as the villain. I understand the meaning behind his character and why he was the villain, but it was just a mixture of poor writing and a poor performance for me that just didn't do it.
Put my best, put my 10, or put my spend, half size, excess.
I did not like how Sony showed what was supposed to be a post-credit scene in the trailer, a scene in which made no sense and had horrible placement. This movie's first cut was probably much better than the final cut, and it would have been better as a rated R film. With a character as dark as Morbius, I believe Sony has learned their lesson, and I do have hope for the new Kraven the Hunter film due out this October. Coming in at number 12, Venom: Let There Be Carnage. As a fan of the first Venom, more on that later, I had high expectations for Let There Be Carnage. I genuinely don't mind these little B-tier superhero/anti-hero movies, but again, much like Morbius, this movie would have benefited from an R rating. With a cruel, evil character like Carnage, I did expect a lot more out of this film. He is supposed to be a bigger threat in every way, and I feel like they tap into that, but they don't expand on it and show Carnage to his full potential. The whole cast is great, but the movie was held back quite a few notches due to being a forced PG-13. Did none of these studios learn from Logan and Deadpool? At number 11 is Spider-Man 3. The beginning of this movie, I absolutely love. I feel like you're watching levels of a video game come to life, and I did enjoy Harry's iteration of the Green Goblin. The story of all these characters seemed to be coming to a final chapter in a full circle. Then once Peter gets his symbiote suit, the story becomes too compact and not evenly distributed between storylines and characters. I was 10 years old when this movie came out, and even then I knew that this was stupid. This movie had so much potential and started off solid, but the back half of this film tears it down so much. Coming in at number 10 is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Unfortunately, it seems to be a recurring theme with Sony to have so much hype and expectations built around a franchise and just completely destroying it. I rank this movie lower because very little of this movie is an actual Spider-Man movie. It is full with nothing but mixed storylines that should have been resolved in the previous movie or earlier in the film, and it is a clear movie that has one intention, and that intention is to set up an entire expanded universe. A universe that never got delivered. I hate putting this movie on the lower half of my ranking because Andrew Garfield is my favorite Spider-Man, but the movie is yet again packed with too many unbalanced characters, and at the time of its release, it was sad that this was Andrew's final performance, given how invested into the character he was and still is. If Sony was able to expand on the universe they were trying to create, this movie would be much higher in my ranking. Coming in at number 9 is Venom. Venom is a movie I did not expect much from, but was surprised as to how much I enjoyed it. Riz Ahmed wasn't very convincing to me as a villain. However, when he becomes Riot, that is a character I enjoyed quite a bit, given how little screen time he had. Tom Hardy is what makes this movie from being ranked lower. His performance isn't one you would have expected if you had seen some of his other work beforehand, and these Venom movies truly do show the range he has as an actor. This is a good movie to throw on if you don't know what to watch and just want to have on some background noise. Coming in at number 8 is Spider-Man: Far From Home. Far From Home is a movie that I feel gets overhated quite a bit. It was coming off the heels of Endgame, which is the better movie in my opinion. However, it's important to realize that this isn't an Avengers movie. I liked how they took the story away from New York City and that Peter just wanted to be a normal kid. He had been through a lot in just a couple years ever since we first met him in Captain America: Civil War, and he just wanted to enjoy his life a little bit. I liked that character dynamic and perspective because it is one we haven't gotten yet in a Spider-Man film. I also enjoyed Jake Gyllenhaal's performance as Mysterio. Just about everybody knew Mysterio was the bad guy and that Jake Gyllenhaal was that character. But when they finally showed Mysterio's betrayal to Peter, it was still kind of heartbreaking because he reminded Peter so much of the mentor that Tony Stark was. This movie may be in the back half of my ranking, but that just goes to show how many good Spider-Man films there are. Don't count this one out. Coming in at number 7 is The Amazing Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man is a movie that is probably lower in most people's rankings. I was disappointed to find out that they were not doing Spider-Man 4 with Tobey, but after I saw Andrew Garfield's performance in The Social Network, I felt like he fit the character well, and then to see his investment and love for the character made me grow to love his performance even more. His Spider-Man gets a lot of praise, which it should. It is the most comic accurate to me out of the 3 that we've had. But his Peter Parker gets a lot of hate, and I do feel like his Peter Parker is great too. It showed at the time what a modern nerd was like. Still a little shy and awkward, but not afraid to stand up for other people. A lot of hate his character gets is because he's a skater boy. But to me, it just kind of made sense because I grew up with skaters that kind of kept to themselves because it wasn't as popular as it was in the 90s. So I never cared about that. And the scene where he is training and skating after getting his powers is my favorite scene in the movie. The Lizard is a villain I had been looking forward to ever since he was teased in the original Spider-Man 2, so it was nice to see that come to the big screen. I defend the villain in this movie because it is that classic tale of scientist goes mad and thinks his answer is the solution to everything. It may come off cheesy and not hold up well over time, but this movie will always be in the top half of my ranking. Coming in at number 6 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man Homecoming is a film that faced a challenge no other Spider-Man movie had yet to face. That challenge is, what is and how does Spider-Man fit into a world where the Avengers exist? And I feel this movie delivered not only on that, but also having it be a kids' movie at heart that can still appeal to adults. John Hughes films were said to have heavy influence on the creation of this movie, and you can certainly feel that coming-of-age story in this movie. He does a great job at putting the weight of a hero into a sophomore's hands with an actor that actually looks and can act like a sophomore, and in my opinion, delivers on every level. It is not my favorite Spider-Man in the Spider-Man Home series, but I do believe it is the most rewatchable. Entering into the top 5 at number 5 is Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 is typically regarded as the best Spider-Man movie of them all, and while I do agree it's great, something about it doesn't hold up to the standards we have today, especially the director's cut of the movie, which is why I'm glad that cut was not released in theaters. I do remember loving this movie as a kid because it upped the ante in every level from the first one. It was the first time to my knowledge we saw something like Doc Ock on the big screen, with these wild robotic tentacles going everywhere and actually have it be convincing. The back and forth between Peter and MJ and Harry I have never been a fan of. My biggest gripe with the series is that Mary Jane serves no purpose other than to just be in the way and need to be saved, which is unfortunate because Kirsten Dunst as an actress has a lot more power that she could bring to the screen. The action in this movie is one of my favorites out of all the films, and the train scene is still one of the best that does hold up to today. At number 4 is Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a movie that does not get enough credit in my opinion. This movie and the original X-Men films are really the groundwork and the foundation for what was to come just a few years later with the MCU, much like how Smallville was the groundwork for the Arrowverse. This movie is very much to me like Superman the movie. It takes its time to have you grow and develop a bond with these characters that you are being introduced to for the first time. After a tragic incident, there is a time jump, and then our character becomes the hero he is supposed to be. Overall, this movie doesn't necessarily end on a cliffhanger, so if it wanted to be a solo movie, it easily could be, and that is something that always sits well with me. On top of all that, it's a classic origin story, and typically one done in this kind of fashion will hold up over time. Entering into our top 3 at number 3 is Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. Much like Spider-Man 1, this movie is a solid origin story to a character that's already established, but taking a different spin and expanding on it. Miles' story is similarly mirrored to Peter Parker's story, with just a few different tweaks, and it's cool to see a different culture have a take on this character of Spider-Man. This movie hits all the levels a comic book origin story should have. It gets you interested and developed in all the characters. It shows a different side to other characters that have already been established within the Spider-Man franchise as a whole. It pulls on your heartstrings. It has a great soundtrack. And obviously what makes it different than any other Spider-Man movie is that it is animated. And this animation style changed the game. I always thought it looked weird and like I wouldn't be able to adapt to it from the trailers. But it picks and chooses the right times to have its animation be a little bit more wacky, and it works every time. This movie is a movie I expected to enjoy but not love, and I ended up loving it more than I thought I would. I understand having this movie at the top is cliche, but a film with all 3 live-action Spider-Man should be on the top. Having the multiverse be the center point of this film is what makes it so much fun from the beginning. The first half of the film many people seem to not like, and I understand that the pacing can be kind of awkward. But I feel that it's like that because if it is your first time watching, you're just waiting and waiting for the other Spider-Man to show up, which is why I went into this movie for the first time with 0 expectations. You can tell Marvel and Sony did everything they could to get as much of what people love from all 3 franchises into one film while adding other elements from the other Marvel world as well. This is the first time there was a Spider-Man movie that was packed full of a ton of different characters between both heroes and villains and gives the proper treatment to them all and doesn't feel as packed as it really is. This movie is always fun to rewatch any time of the year, And as a Spider-Man fan, it will just fill your heart and make you happy, sad, fulfilled, and satisfied in every way. And my new number 1 is Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. This movie is still fresh, so I won't give away any spoilers. But this movie took the top spot because it did what most sequels rarely do. It took all the best elements from the first movie and elevated it to level 10. This movie is made and aimed for kids, yet it still feels very adult. The comedy is in the proper places and it never feels misused. They kept a lot of the cameos secret, which is always fun to have those little surprises. This movie gives you everything you wanted and adds elements you didn't even think you wanted, which is why it took over my top spot. My full review of this film is also out now. Go check it out. That's my ranking of the Spider-Verse. Tell me in the comments below your Spider-Verse rankings and be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you and see you at the movies.